Good morning, everyone that's here in the room at Virtual Edge Summit and our virtual audience. I am Michelle Bruno. I am so pleased to be the Twitter moderator, so if there is a virtual audience that has questions, I'll be there to help feed them to our speakers today. I want to introduce our speakers. We have Kimberly Stone, who is Director Web and Creative Services for PlanView, and we have Erica Spohr, Global Event Strategist at Cisco Live. So without further ado, let's get started. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, we can't really see you guys real well. I'm Kimberly Stone, and she said I'm Director of Web and Creative Services at PlanView. And we've been doing virtual events for about 2 years. We've done 3, and we're about to do our 4th in March. And we've done a user conference and a product launch and an industry event, sort of a trade industry event. And we're going to do another product launch in March. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys today about this, and I hope you find this educational and a good thing.
And I'm Erica Spohr. I'm the Global Event Strategist for Cisco Live, which is Cisco's portfolio of annual customer conferences. And for the past 3 years, we've been doing a robust virtual event as part of the Cisco Live conference. The last 2 years have actually been a virtual hybrid event. And this year we'll be doing five Cisco Live conferences globally, all of which will have a virtual hybrid component. And my role really is in helping Cisco to define where virtual fits into the event portfolio for Cisco Live. I'm responsible for helping to evolve and innovate that brand. And as part of that, that virtual falls into that from a strategic planning perspective. So. Oh.
Yeah, go ahead.
For those that want to tweet in questions, I'm sorry, we're on hashtag VES070W. Thanks.
Thank you. We were also going to say that we're going to try to get through the talk pretty quickly because we have 45 minutes today. So we'll leave time for questions at the end. But so queue them up and go ahead and send them to the Twitter feed, and we'll definitely address them at the end of the talk.
All right. Okay. So did that skip ahead?
No, it's good.
Okay. Cool.
So like we said at the start, this is a really broad topic to address in 45 minutes to actually give you the true strategic foundation to plan your virtual event. So what we thought we would do is first start with the context of the key phases that you need to be thinking about and really addressing very explicitly as you move into your virtual event planning process. And starting first with obviously the vision, the strategy, and the buy-in, moving through then into defining the attendee experience, what is the event going to look and feel like, what are you trying to deliver through the event, and then through to resources, platforms, all the fun stuff around costs and how you're going to get it done. And then we'll touch a little bit on marketing and promotions and production and event execution, but frankly, we're going to focus on really the first 3 sections of what you see up there today, just to kind of focus more on that strategic planning side of virtual events.
All right, so the first thing, I really can't see you guys well, but I wanted to get a show of hands for what's driving you to virtual. So who's going to virtual because it's cool and awesome? Okay, that's nobody. Good for you.
Smarter than
Good
that.
answer. Who's going to virtual because an executive heard about it and wants it? Nobody?
Might be more than one.
Might be more than one? You got one? Oh, okay. Dangerous. All right. So who's actually interested in virtual to reduce travel expenses for participants? Okay, quite a few of you looking to do that. And what about reducing marketing expenses? A little pressure on the marketing budget? Anyone? Okay, not so much there. That's actually good. There's a comment to that. And what about, are you driving, looking for new ways to reach your desired audiences? Okay, quite a few there. So looking to use technology to improve your information dissemination. And are you the person who's actually driving your organization? Okay, several of you there. All right, so interesting.
Good. Well, that's really nice to get a feel for kind of the temperature of the room and understand where you're sitting. Those are all really common reasons to be obviously evaluating virtual, and certainly fall on the list of why we, got into it when we did. Virtual is a really exciting new transformation for the event industry. It's very easy to get caught up in the excitement of the features, the functionality, what you can do, and the bright, shiny new object. But in order to truly be effective down the road and drive the impact you're looking for, you need to take a step back and start with asking, some key questions, and namely, start at the very beginning. What are you trying to do? Who are you trying to reach? Is it customers? Is it members? Is it employees and staff? partners, resellers, prospects, is it influencers, media and analysts? And this is really important because how you shape that experience is going to be really defined by who you're going after. And also their ability and interest in engaging in the virtual platform may vary depending on who you're talking to. And then what are you trying to do? And prioritize this. Typically it's going to be more than one objective here. I think most of us in event marketing these days are trying to generate leads. That's why we live and exist. But what else are you trying to do? Are you educating and training? Are you extending reach and awareness? Really kind of sit down and think about what you hope as an organization to achieve out of this virtual event, and then write it down. So simple, but something that I think is very easy to move past because you're getting excited about the technology or your executive is. So at Cisco, we have an annual strategic planning process that we go through for both the in-person and virtual events. We call it our annual strategic planning boot camp. And what the output is something similar to the graphic you see on the screen. We walk out of that with a well-defined set of our mission, our strategy, and then our execution plan against that strategy for both the in-person event and the virtual. And we actually drill down one level deeper than this, and each of the functional leads on the Cisco Live team will take it down to their level of what are the tactics that they're going to align against executing their objectives. And I think what this does is it keeps you on task, and it stops that scope creep down the road because it keeps you true to what you're trying to achieve and who you're trying to reach. It can also serve as a great tool for executive management if you have them increasing your scope or changing your reach midstream. So I think those are some key takeaways there.
All right, so after you've kind of given some thought to your event objectives, you're going to start thinking about what the category is of your event. So there's a bunch of different types of events. So it might be a product launch or an industry event, maybe a sales meeting, job fair. Could be doing just training and education. So it could be any number of types of events, and different types of events have different types of components. And then the other thing you need to think about is, where does this fit in your marketing mix? Is this net new? Is this replacing like an existing campaign? Are you, evolving an existing event? How does it match up? So for us, we did a product launch last year, and that was actually replacing a campaign. And so, when we have different scenarios, we did an industry event, and that was net new. And we did a user conference virtually during a tough fiscal year that our, customers just could not travel, and that was a temporary replacement of a physical event. So you're going to figure out this context with your marketing mix and what you're doing. So the other exciting thing is selling your vision internally. So look around your company and talk to people and find out what is the experience with virtual. Maybe some of your marketers have been to virtual events before. Maybe some other people have been to some virtual events. Maybe no one has been to virtual events and they don't know anything about it. So you really need to get a temperature because you're going to need to span the business in order to pull off your event. So you need to sell this vision. The best way to sell the vision is to demo a live virtual event. So when you start working with vendors, you need to get into their demo platform and you need to schedule sessions where you give your stakeholders logins and take them in and take them on a tour, because that's what's going to get people excited. People start going, well, is this a webcast, or what is this? And they're not going to be sure about it, but the second they get their hands on it and they get in, they're going to have that aha moment and they're going to be like, oh my God, we could do this, we could use this. The danger of that is that that's where your scope starts creeping out. Oh my God, we could do all these different things, and you want to rein them back to the objectives a little bit, but at least you have that excitement. So absolutely you want to demo.
And I don't know how many of you attended the keynote just before this session, but the other thing you need to be doing during this process of building your vision and selling your vision is to really make sure you've got the executive kind of air coverage, or if it's executive or your direct line manager, just making sure that you have the support, because you will get those phone calls like they talked about questioning why we're moving to virtual. And it won't happen just at the first of the event potentially. It could happen down cycle as well. Or conversely, you could have the situation like we had at Cisco 2 years ago, again driven by the economy and the recession that was impending. We were getting a sense from the field and sales teams that our customers weren't going to be traveling to our annual event. They were struggling to get funding. There was threats of registration being really low. And Cisco is obviously an early adopter of technology, being a technology company itself. And so the CMO and even the CEO were ready to jump in with both feet and just go virtual. They said, let's do it. And it took our team actually going back and building a business case for not canceling a 12,000 person conference that had been in existence for 25 years and moving it all virtual, in one fell swoop. So that's how we actually settled on the hybrid model 2 years ago, and we've been activating that successfully since then. And it was a really nice balance of meeting the executive demand and also keeping true to our customer and our audience objectives.
So, as you're building out, your thoughts about your event, the next thing you want to think about is how will you measure success? And I can't stress enough the importance of putting metrics early on behind your event. So there are a lot of different ways to measure success in virtual. And the thing you really need to think about is that the way you measure success between one company and another company and one event, even within a company and another event, are going to vary. There's a few standard things, did they attend, did they show up on the live day that you're going to do, but there are going to be unique to you and unique to your company measurements. Maybe you're looking for moving people up in the sales cycle. Maybe you're looking for a certain level of leads. Maybe you're looking to have customers migrate to a new version and other things like that. So you're going to have very specific things. And this goes back to that reaching across the business, because some of those you may need sales involvement, or you may need the customer service side so that you can get the metrics from them to see how much your event influenced, because events are not cost neutral. I mean, they cost money, right, these virtual events. So you want to make sure that when all is said and done and an executive comes to you and say, so what did we get? You have numbers to back it up, and that you have advertised to the business units. This is what our goals are, and did we make them? And you do the analysis.
Absolutely, and I think what you see here are probably some standard categories of what you should expect to measure in virtual, so you can sort of take that as a takeaway, and then the slice of the pie is what obviously changes depending on the event or customer. And you can see these are theoretical examples between Cisco and PlanView, but generally we're using virtual to drive and extend reach, bring in net new audiences, and as part of that, we're achieving some of the other business impact goals of loyalty and sales acceleration, but that's why the slice of the pies you might see here are a little broader for us on registration and then demographics and reach. So, and then the next slide is an eye chart, but we're not providing it so you can read it. We're actually providing it more as a takeaway as part of the handout, because we feel that it would be nice to leave you with some takeaways should you go out and want to structure your own measurement program around virtual events. This would be a place to start. I think you can see that some of these metrics are exactly what you might measure for an in-person event, and some of them are unique to virtual. So certainly, measuring the level of engagement is one area that, again, they spoke about in the keynote this morning, if you heard that's one of that we're talking about engagement platforms here, not just virtual events and environments. And so measuring that is critical, and lots of ways you can do it. Duration of visit, it's great if they stay longer than 2 minutes, right? So if you get 5,000 accounts activated, what does it matter if they didn't stay for longer than a minute or two? So you want to be looking at other activity, what are they doing? How many booth visits are they getting? What are the session views overall? How much collateral is being downloaded? What's the engagement in gaming and contests and those kinds of things? And then demographics and reach, again, another area where you heard it in the keynote today, and I'm sure you're going to hear it, at this conference, that virtual is absolutely extending across global, geographic boundaries. It's giving people that maybe are prospective customers a very low barrier to entry way to explore your solutions. And also for us, for Cisco specifically, we're seeing a higher level attendee come into our virtual space than we see at our traditional user conference. So we're getting more to the business decision maker audience, which is who we want to see. And we're also able to pull in some smaller companies that don't have the funding to send a bunch of people out of the office for a week to a conference experience. So those are really valuable benefits back to Cisco that we're able to measure through virtual.
Right, so a little more on the demographics and the reach. We found at PlanView that when we went virtual, suddenly we had huge participation from EMEA that we never had in our user conferences before. It was a complete uptick across the board in any of our events. So when you're thinking about how you're going to measure success and the possibilities of this, you can be pretty creative about what you want to do and where you want to expand, right? Because the stats are there and they will support you. The danger is that you're going to have so many stats at the end of your event. You're going to just dedicate a ton of hours into going through those stats. So figure out what types of metrics are going to help you in those first couple weeks after the event figure out what your activity should be doing. If your activity is around, I need this event for lead gen and I need to feed into the sales funnel. These, the sales guys are waiting for me to get leads. You're going to look at, some different stats, and maybe if you're going to put them into a nurturing marketing campaign. So you really want to have those metrics. Or otherwise, I can tell you that first week after, you're just going to be like, what do I do when you see the robust reporting that you get from these platforms? So just, have really clear success metrics.
It's also why you need to set it up early, because when you're setting up your reg profile questions and all that stuff that happens in the platform, you need to know what you're hoping to get on the back end before you go in there. So, and you also need to tie it back to your objectives, make sure that you're setting expectations with your executives. So, so if you're measuring engagement but they don't care about that, then it doesn't matter, right? So.
All right, so now we're going to narrow the focus a little bit. We've talked about objectives and about success metrics. So we're going to talk a little bit about the next steps that you would do. So the first thing that you're going to get asked, and I get asked every event, is, should we charge? Should we charge for this? And, you're going to have to think about, is this, is this replacing an event, or, is it replacing an event where you've charged in the past? Is it something completely new that, people don't really know much about? Well, I'm probably not going to charge at that point. So you're going to have to think about these things. Are we getting such high value content that people would love to pay for it, right? How often does that happen? So you're going to have to think of, what it is that you're offering and whether it's really feasible to charge for it or not. And, we'll take Virtual Edge as an example. So they have a fee model of, you pay a conference fee to come here. You can attend free, if you're out there attending free. If you want it on demand, it's $125. So there's a bunch of different fee models that you could come up with if you wanted to choose attendees. But you just really need, that's back to that, who are you going to reach? What will they tolerate?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just in our experience with our companies and also just doing some research, I think a nice place to start is to think about 20 to 25% of how you might value or price an in-person event is a great starting place for your virtual events. So it may not be where you end up, and a lot of content's available out there free, so you're battling that when you're asking people to pay. But you heard today again in the keynote that these are profit centers for media companies. So it's possible, if you're investing in the content, the speakers, and the richness of the experience, it's possible to drive revenue out of these platforms. So this is a starting point, just as a place to begin.
Yeah, and it absolutely is possible to drive revenue. It may not offset your costs, but if you have an audience that's already used to paying for an event, you'd be surprised they'll pay for virtual. So the next thing you're going to think about, when you're starting to think about budget and fee models, is should we have sponsors? I'm going to tell you there are huge benefits to having sponsors. Obviously, just throughout, it'll offset event costs, right? But you can do more creative things. You can get access to their house lists. They can do a content exchange with you. Maybe they have reach to media outlets that you don't have. Having them in the platform, has increased activity, increased presence, increased energy, having lots of sponsors in there. The right partner can just be a brand lift for your event, right? And then there's a bunch of different, ways that you can go about it. So you could take a traditional approach like you would to a physical event and have like tiered levels of sponsorships, and you get different things. Maybe you get, your logo on outreach, or maybe you get a booth, or maybe you get a session that, is the sponsor talking about what they do. Or you could do, hey, give us content, we'll place your logo here and there. Maybe they can sponsor a case study from one of their customers. That's always a great way to do things. There's a ton of different ways that you can approach the sponsor scenario. So starting to see, starting to build out basically the plan that we talked about. And so you're going to start getting down to a little more detail level. And you need this level of detail to start talking to vendors. So like any event, you're going to talk about, what's the date? Is Germany off that day? You're going to start thinking about all of those things. You're going to think about, how long are our sessions and how long is this event? And you're going to think about, how long is our on-demand period? Do we need it for 90 days? Do we need this for a year? So you're going to think about those things. You're going to think about, just like you would a regular event, your theme and your design and your brand. You want those early on because once you engage a vendor, you're going to build a microsite and you want everything, all communications early on to be branded. So you don't necessarily have to have the theme right here, but you want to start thinking about it. You want to get your Marcom and your creative team starting to think about what this is. And it shouldn't be too hard. You've already decided who your audience is. And then you're going to start thinking a little bit more about what is the attendee experience that we want to create. So, do we want a chat room? Well, is this a chat group? Does this audience chat? Do we want forums? Will they use forums? And, what does it take to support them on our end? What kind of content do we have? What are the right topics? Who are the right speakers? What's the right session? Do we do live Q&A? And so you don't necessarily have to have absolute firm answers, but you want to start envisioning that experience for your attendees. The big thing here is the quick tip. Absolutely tie to objectives, because this is where scope creep starts to happen for your event, because you're going to go, we can have semi-live sessions, we can have 10, and we can have 20 booths, and we can have 30 sponsors, and we can have this, and you'll start getting that shiny, oh my goodness, this will do everything. And that's not necessarily the right answer. Maybe your event needs 5 booths and 10 on-demand sessions and 2 live sessions. So, maybe it needs 20 live sessions and 20 booths. But you need to think carefully about what your objectives are and what you're trying to achieve and what is the right mix.
One other thing I would say on timing that I don't know if some of you are wrestling with, but is to just be considerate of time zones, because because online has no geographic boundary, you might draw from audiences you would never expect, and don't limit yourself by scheduling at a time when the rest of the world can't participate. So you might see your agenda invert for a virtual event from what you might do traditionally for an in-person event pattern, where you might have a keynote in the morning and follow with the session. So think about that as you're creating the agenda. Who are you trying to reach, and when are they going to be awake and able to sit at their computer?
That's right.
In some cases maybe you're doing it after hours too. That's I don't think it's typical for corporate, but something to think about.
Yeah, we've done 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. events to catch EMEA and in the Australia's morning. So it's definitely something you want to think about.
Resources. So this is one of the hidden gotchas, I think, in virtual events that you can go into without expecting, which is that, not only do virtual events require quite a few resources, and those fairly similar to what you do for an in-person event. I think you probably heard that. Michael Doyle was talking about that in his comments in the keynote this morning. But you also have some new skill sets you have to bring in. So you need some folks that are, familiar with content and with video and media production. You got to capture your content, the audio, the video, convert it. You're going to need to do some editing on it. You might be doing some pre-production work on the video, and you might be doing some kind of real-time or some post-production. So you're going to need a lot of that. You need people comfortable in the space, so people that are going to be able to moderate activities in virtual. You're going to need your subject matter experts internally to learn some new skills in some cases around how to engage effectively in a virtual environment. So you want to set yourself up for success, making sure that you have the key staff roles filled either in-house or through a vendor partner or consulting relationship that you might traditionally use for in-person. And you also will still need your you still will need your marketing lead, and that's vital. You'll still need your content and speaker manager, and your exhibit and sponsor manager, if you're going to go down that route, will be key to your success. So those are 3 kind of traditional roles that you see fulfilled in in-person events that will be mirrored in your virtual, in addition to the new ones you'll have to bring on.
So you're going to start at this point getting to where you want to evaluate platforms. And so the thing to keep in mind when you're talking to vendors and they're going, it does the world, it'll make you breakfast, it's awesome, is to keep in mind that your feature set is driven by the attendee experience, which is driven by your objectives. So keep firm to that, because some of the things they show you might be, we hadn't thought of that, and let's incorporate that. But just, be careful during this part of the process. What I did when I was initially evaluating vendors is I created a feature matrix. And so list on the left of, the main features that we wanted for the event. Color-coded it, because I'm like that. Green, they have it. Yellow, they had it, but with some, maybe not perfect. No, not at all. And you'll get that, and then you'll eventually get to a price point with them, and you'll have a big picture, because not all vendors are created equal. They have different strengths and weaknesses, and there's going to be a vendor that is the match for your event, for your particular event, right? And so you need to dig in with the sales guy and get the real answers. Don't let them be all like, well, yeah, we kind of, no, you need to dig in and do a matrix, and you have to say, well, X vendor said they have this, this, and this. Do you have that? But I found this massively helpful when I was evaluating vendors.
The other thing that can be counterintuitive, we've had situations where we've actually simplified our user interface and not actually gone with the latest WYSIWYG new thing because it didn't meet the attendees' needs. They wanted to be able to interact more quickly. They didn't want to be, they didn't want to be bogged down with some of the graphic treatments that were available in the new UI. So your desire to kind of deliver this amazing, immersive platform might be counter to what the attendees hoping to drive out of it. So I know that our virtual leads sort of got that through feedback that they were monitoring on the chats, and actually we've made some different decisions on the roadmap based on that.
So you're building out this plan, and cost is a big part of it. Your budget is a big part of it. So we're just trying to give you hints on different gotchas that you might want to be aware of as you're building out this budget. So production cost might be a big gotcha for you. We're lucky at PlanView. We have our own studio. We have an amazing production director. We have equipment, lights. Well, actually, for a while, we didn't have lights, so that was a hidden cost that we didn't know. Our lights weren't good enough. We now have them. So, so maybe you need video production, or maybe, you need, your Marcom folks are booked and you need some new writers, or maybe you want to repurpose some content, but it needs to be rebranded, but your designers are booked, so you need extra designers. So there's some hidden costs in there depending on your resources. Maybe you can, find them in-house, right? And maybe you've sold this well enough that you can get them, but you just want to be aware and thinking that this could come up, because virtual needs to be done way ahead of time, as opposed to, you can wait till the speakers show up for a physical event. But virtual, a lot of it gets done way ahead of time, especially if you're doing like preloaded on-demand sessions, because there's a whole realm of QA that you do in the environment. So you're loading up weeks ahead of time. So just, think about these types of things. You don't necessarily have to have all the answers, but these do impact your budget. So you need to get fairly quickly to an assessment of what you have and what you will need.
Marketing. So there are several sessions on the agenda here at VES digging into audience acquisition and the use of social media. Highly recommend you participate in some of those because this is critical. Just like we talk about bums and seats for in-person events, the same thing is true with virtual, and you're going to be going through a similar process with your planning considerations for your marketing program as you move into virtual. So timing and frequency of your touches and your outreach. For us, because we do a hybrid, we actually we passively market through a microsite the event year-round because it lives perpetually, but when we are getting ready to go into an active marketing phase for the virtual event that's located concurrently with the in-person event, we actually hold off on doing a lot of those pushes until our early bird period closes for in-person, just to clarify and not in some ways to just not confuse the messages. We're not so worried about cannibalization of the in-person event as we are about keeping the messages clear and simple. So that's sort of the cadence that we've been playing with the last few years. You need to be thinking about what will work for you and your audience. Discounts and promotions, lots of ways to play here. I think that this is a point when you maybe revisit your fee model. So you may have come up with some pricing in your initial planning. When you go to kind of do your marketing communications planning, I think maybe that's when, we found that we sort of step back and go, gosh, is that right? Like, does that feel right? Does it look right in copy as we're putting together emails? So you may find that your pricing model shifts a little bit here, and you can play around with promotions as well. Obviously, a lot of things that work for in-person events work here too. Always trying to upsell our guests, get them to buy the premium pass. So, that's a tactic that we've been using as well. Cisco has a lot of in-house lists that we use, and we maintain sort of a relationship with our user, with our conference attendees. But we have explored other list sources internally that we weren't maybe using before or didn't get approval to use before for the in-person event that they're willing to let us invite to the virtual event. So one of them is like certifications and training. So there may be sources in-house that you don't have access to for your in-person event that they might be willing to kind of let you touch, or the sales teams might give you for virtual. So definitely explore those. External works, certainly when you're looking to drive a net new audience you don't have a relationship with, and working on negotiating media buys in exchange for lists can be one possibility. I think that will add to your marketing costs for sure, though. Lists are not cheap, as most of us know. Social media for amplification and notification of offers, I think, is great. Obviously there's this big convergence between these virtual platforms becoming engagement platforms, and social media is now part of them. So, it's kind of integrated in, but using it as part of your promotional cycle as well. We have the luxury of having somebody on the team that actually really focuses on social media for us, both virtual and in person. So very active and follows a cadence similar to what you would for follows a cadence on Twitter that we're following maybe in the email marketing, and obviously is tweeting a lot more frequently. LinkedIn, Facebook, all of those are tools that we use in our arsenal for social media. And be thinking ahead of how you're going to engage post-event. Even if you're not going to keep your community live, 365 days a year like Cisco does, you're going to want to keep a relationship with them, keep them opted in, and be able to invite them to future events. So what are you going to offer them, maybe, post-event? And then don't forget sponsor enablement and internal comms on your plan. So be sure that, to the point of making sure your those new resources you need to dig into are aware. Keep them posted on how progress is going. Set up a plan for speaker engagement. And really, look at how you're going to talk to your sponsors and keep them going along. And then for audience acquisition specifically, really, these are some examples of traditional and maybe newer approaches that I think all of us are sort of adopting. As we move into the next kind of phase of marketing and how you do that, but find the right mix for you. I think that's the key. If Twitter doesn't work for your audience, then then it doesn't make sense to use it. I think you've got to really be critical about where you're going to spend your time and money to get people there. And these are examples of sort of a 365-day-a-year microsite that lives, and we have a video box that's there, and we have a promotional video that runs, kind of teasing people as to what they can get out of virtual. And then at the bottom is just an example of one of our virtual banners from the website. So.
All right, so we're going to end with just some basic best practices for you guys. And the first one that I would recommend very strongly is to use formal project management. So this, don't be fooled, the platform build is a IT project. It is a technical piece. It has all sorts of things going on, and it benefits greatly from project management. If you have a really good vendor, they will provide you with a project manager. It doesn't hurt to have a project manager in-house or to use project management techniques on your side. But virtual just lends itself to project management so much, and it has saved me. When execs have come to me and been, oh, we need an event in 5 weeks. Project management is the key. Get it all figured out. Excel is my best friend. During our user conference, I had 112 people to manage. They were in Excel and they were scheduled across the event. So, definitely use formal project management. Make sure the content is relevant for your audience. The thing about this is that you're going to go, we have all this content. Let's just throw everything in. Don't throw everything in. That's bad. You need to throw in the right content for your event to make sure that it's targeted, because you have specific objectives. So don't just throw in a bunch of your marketing crap. Throw in very specific things that are going to help the user out and lead you to your goals with the event. Because the temptation is, we've got it, more is better, let's throw it in, and you're going to overwhelm people. That's no good. So don't do that. Target your content carefully. And absolutely, if you choose to go with sponsors, build a sponsor enablement kit. You're building most of this stuff anyways. You're building out emails and banners and brand graphics for your event. Spend a little bit extra time, put together a kit for your sponsors, and enable them, help them, get out there and market your event for you as well. And you may need to actually spend some time with them and help them out. One of the cons of sponsors is that, they're a time suck. That's the one downside, is that, yeah, you're going to get all these benefits from them, but they're going to take more of your resource time. And if they're not familiar with virtual, you're going to have to train them, how to use the environment, how to market virtual, all of those things. I found it to be completely worth it, but you want to do everything you can to enable them, because then they'll come back next year and give you more money. Mm-hmm. So.
The next tip would be to just recognize that if you're the event producer, it's really your job to bring that event to life. So you have to walk the walk and talk the talk. And our virtual leads, we have actual virtual producers and managers that tell us this all the time. Get in there, be active, respond in a timely manner. We've learned a lot of amazing things just monitoring the chat's kind of we've learned things about the in-person event monitoring the chats in the virtual space. So be there to answer questions. You can have a relationship with customers in a virtual space that you might not be confident having in person. Don't worry if you've got a technical audience and you're not technical. They aren't so worried about that. They want to engage. They want dialogue. They want guidance in some cases. So just be in there and be active. The next one is start early. I don't know if you've gotten a sense of this, but you really have a lot of moving pieces with a virtual event. You want to make sure you leave yourself enough on-ramp for marketing in order to be successful. So you want enough time to make that happen. And you also need to, you don't want to underestimate the lead time that goes into pre-production work. So if you're planning on having presentations available in the system, well, guess what? That backs your content timeline out and your speaker timeline out quite a bit, right? Because that's all got to be ready for you to upload in there. It's got to be converted and made ready, and then it can be put in there. So really give yourself time if your executive's not coming and making you do it in 5 weeks.
Yeah.
Reach across the business. We've talked about this a few times, but you might find surprising support in areas you didn't expect. To Kimberly's point of project management, perhaps IT is sort of an opportunity to leverage some of those skill sets. And that would be one thing to consider as well. Make sure that account reps and customer-facing staff are available in the event if your customers are going to be there. Makes a lot of sense. And that will take a little bit of training on your part to get them enabled. So really consider that virtual can break the boundaries of the organization internally as well. And then lastly, have fun. So, virtual can allow, companies and brands to be more playful than you would be in a formal setting. So, leverage that. Don't worry about interactions being a little more casual or informal than they might be otherwise. That's expected and it's standard. So, try to have some fun.
Great, so that was our talk.
Yeah.
So I think we've got a few minutes left. I think we did pretty good. Not too bad.
Yeah.
So we have a few minutes left for questions.
I've got one question, which is about your internal teams. Mm-hmm. How did you build qualified internal teams to, start doing virtual events? How did you train them? You talked a lot about skill sets.
Right. So there are kind of different levels of teams. So there is the people who are pulling the event off, and then the people who are staffing the event. And so there's sort of different approaches. The people who are pulling the event off are primarily, marketers, the studio guy, my team, the web team. The studio guy, Keith is natural in this. This is his world. The web team, this feels natural for them. Marketing folks, so we have really great marketing folks. So they just came to it really easily. The challenge was more on the side of the SMEs and the executives and getting our executives in, and they had a lot of fear, especially around chat. So again, it's back to that demoing, getting them in early once the platform was built and getting some backdoor access into the event, getting everybody in and having some practice sessions and getting them comfortable. And so that helped a lot, and I would recommend doing that.
And Cisco's a large organization, so the team structure in general and virtual was obviously added as integrated into the in-person event experience. So what we have found to be the most successful is we have several leads actually dedicated to different parts of, we've kind of played with it, I should say, a little bit. Previously, we kind of had them organized by function, so some of them were doing production, some of them were doing more of the strategy role, and we had it broken out that way. And we've now gone to a model where it's more of they're kind of a top-to-bottom producer service model. So they're producing different parts of the U.S. event, or in some cases, because we're supporting a global portfolio, each of them is assigned to produce, to work with our leads outside of the U.S. on producing that virtual experience for that event. So we played around with it a little bit. I think that having eyes dedicated on it is important if you can get to that point, to have somebody who's really steeped in it and really living it and breathing it. And I think what's unique, the unique skill set I would say, is just passion for technology and having that real interest and that intrigue around what's next, what's coming out. Somebody who's if you can find somebody who's really active just by nature on Twitter and in social media, that's a great skill set, I think, because they bring that in. A lot of Gen Ys kind of bring that to us. So you might want to be looking at an age group you might not normally for a more senior position than they would typically have. So I would say the dedicated, somebody having eyes dedicated to virtual is really important. And then I think you can part-time, you could probably do marketing as a shared service. This is meaning borrow time from somebody else in the organization for the duration of the cycle. You could borrow time, probably assign somebody to be maybe a content speaker manager for a duration of the cycle that wouldn't be a full-time job necessarily for year-round. But those would kind of be some tips.
So everything looks good on paper.
It does.
Tell us what goes wrong. Tell us where to look for if we're going to, go into this area for the things that are maybe the more obvious areas. Is it technical glitches?
Oh, yeah.
What's the big
There's
stuff?
all sorts of things. So the first thing that can go wrong is that your executives are going to give you impossible timelines. I'm just going to tell you that again and again. I'm really burned from the 5-week pull-off of virtual event thing. So not having the right timeline is hugely risky. You can do it, but you may not get everything you wanted out of it. Another thing that can go wrong is you can have speakers not show up for chats or speakers not show up for their live Q&A. They're lost and they got lost in the exhibition hall and they're supposed to be in the networking lounge, and because you're not physically there to grab them and drag them over, you're on the phone with them. So that's a little weird. If there's always a risk with the live, and we haven't done live. One of the reasons we don't do true live, we do semi-live. So it's pre-recorded video and live Q&A, and that's just purely for my executives' comfort level, because we know that our vendor, it's going to turn on. I mean, I still am call 911 if it doesn't turn on because I'm going to be on the floor, but it turns on every time, and so that's good. But obviously, if you were doing something live, there would be a lot more risk. Other things that could go wrong. There's really not that much if you're really project managing it.
I was going to say, I think it's the moving parts that can go wrong.
Yeah.
Stuff can slip through the cracks. I can't think of, I think that the technology has kind of evolved to the point where all of us are relying on technology. We're all relying on wireless, connectivity to drive our events these days, in person or virtual. So, the technical challenges that you would have at the virtual event are not, we have those with in-person events. So I don't think it's so much fear of failure of technology. It's more, missing parts. It's sort of the softer side of the event that can go wrong. You can have some glitches like data mismatches and
minor things
like that.
We missed when we did our product launch, and I'll talk about this in session at 2. We missed something so obvious that afterwards we were like, oh, duh, we didn't do deep enough product demos, and we were like,
right.
How did we miss that in a product launch? So sometimes, and that was the 5-week one. That's probably how we missed that. But sometimes you're so wrapped up in it, you're not stepping back and really looking at it properly. So that type of thing. But that's it.
So one last question is about the virtual attendee experience. There's a lot of chat going on right now about panel discussions, how they're unsuitable for the virtual audience. There's too much talking, not enough engagement. What are your recommendations for making the engagement piece really, really rich for the virtual attendee?
So what we've done, we've done a couple different things. So we actually depend on the chat feature a lot, and we host Q&As in the networking lounge. We host meet and greets in the networking lounge. That was sort of an experiment we did our first conference, and we actually turned out that they came and they chatted, and it was crazy, and our executives were typing like the wind, and it was awesome. So we leveraged the chat feature a lot. And we leverage social media a lot, especially the most recent event in November was Twitter crazy. Twitter was nuts. We underestimated Twitter and could barely keep up with it. It was unbelievable. So I think those help offset the fact that, just kind of watching. And I actually really like the live Q&A component. If you can do a live Q&A component, I would really recommend it. It's really easy. Your speakers just, go into a booth, or they call into a number, and then suddenly it's like live, and people type in their questions and submit it through the system, and then it's like magic. There's a whole live feeling to it. And then the speakers can follow up afterwards if they didn't, just like a regular event. So I think that helps a lot too.
And I would kind of agree. I don't know if panels are exclusively not okay for virtual, but I think panels are hard to succeed at an in-person event. They have to be so well facilitated. And so I would say the key to kind of a good virtual experience is the same thing. You've got to be able to facilitate that panel effectively. And so I would rely on my moderator to make that more effective. And some of the things that I know we do when we think about our agenda, again, we have this merging of the in-person and the virtual event, but we struggle with crafting an experience that's too focused on the in-person attendee. So we've started to do these immersive connections between the two. Last year, we actually panned the keynote audience at Cisco Live and brought that into the virtual event, and then we had some shout outs from, we actually had not just the people watching virtually, but we had sales teams at Cisco hosting customers in satellite Cisco offices, and we actually brought some of them in as well into the keynote experience live to those who are in person. So creating that immersion between the two is something to consider if you're looking at a hybrid model. And I would say that same thing on the Q&A, following up the keynotes with an executive chat opportunity possibly, so so that there's a ability for more of a deep dive. And that's something that can be very exclusive to virtual events. It's not often that a lot of times the executives, they get mobbed at the stage of an in-person event. They're not as accessible. In a virtual event, you can control the chat. They can have more time that's more focused. So that can actually be a really big value of doing the engagement with your executive in a virtual event versus how you can do it in person. So
yeah, and I'd also say there's huge opportunity in the exhibition hall. You absolutely want to staff your booths, and you want people there, and you want chatting with the people that come in. We have great interactivity in the exhibition hall every time.
Great. Thank you so much. Kimberly Stone from PlanView and Erica Spohr from Cisco Live. Thank you so much for bringing this information to us.
Thanks. Yeah, so thirsty.